Hi there, this video is the first in a set of three which will be dealing with the bearing removal and refitting on a Hotpoint WM11 as well as a replacement of the drum support. The WM range of Hotpoint machines were the continuation of the 9.5 series which was so popular, and therefore a majority of the mechanical work attributed to the WM range will also apply to the 9.5 series, including the bearing replacement. Before you start work on any domestic appliance, disconnect the machine from the mains power supply. And in this instance, it would be worthwhile to make sure that there's no water left in the container before you access the inner drum. So tilt the machine backwards slightly and prop it up with a wooden block or something similar. Lower the outlet hose into a washing up bowl so it's very low to the ground, and any water remaining in the container will flow out. When the flow stops, lift the hose and lower the machine. There are two screws holding the top on. Undo these and slide it backwards, then lift it off. The dispenser drawer will just pull out if you give it a firm tug. Behind it are 4 stainless steel screws that have to be removed. Remember to keep these screws separate from the others because they are stainless steel, which prevents them from rusting. To remove the timer knob, you'll need to undo the clamping screw on it, which is accessible through this hole on top of the cabinet. Behind the timer knob are 2 more screws that need to be removed before the fascia panel can be taken off. With a thin bladed screwdriver, lever the 2 sections of this clasp apart and the retaining band can be removed from the seal. Unhook it from the lip on the front panel and fold it into the drum out of the way. The door switch or interlock is held on by 2 screws which also hold the latch plate on. It may be an idea to hold the interlock when you remove the screws just to give it a bit of extra support. They're not all of the same design as this model, which also has a pecker cable and air pipe attached. Remove the 2 side screws from the top of the panel but leave the centre one. Now remove all 3 of the lower screws. You can now take the remaining screw out and the front panel will come off. There's about 12 clips that hold the drum front onto the container, and by using a flat bladed screwdriver to lever them up they come off quite easily. Make a note that the 3 on the bottom are smaller and of different design. Remember this for when you reassemble it. If you push the belt away from the container as you turn it, it will come off the pulley without too much trouble. You'll now need to remove the inspection plate at the rear of the cabinet so you can get access to the pulley on the locking nut, which prevents it unscrewing during normal use. Put the handle of a hammer or a block of wood between the spokes of the pulley and one of the container recesses. This will prevent the pulley from turning as you undo the locking nut. It's preferable to use a ring spanner rather than an open-ended spanner to undo this nut, because ring spanners tend to grip better, and you may need to tap it with a hammer if it's really tight. Once the nut's been removed, replace the hammer handle or block of wood, and by turning the inner drum anti-clockwise it'll unscrew the pulley. If you unhook the rear spring and pull the container forward, It will give you a bit of clearance to remove the pulley. Unless you have a heavy rubber mallet or a copper hammer, then use a block of wood against the shaft and hit it as hard as possible to free it from the bearings. The wood is to protect the thread and the end of the shaft. Some engineers just screw the nut back on and hit that, but if you miss hit, you could damage the nut and the thread. If you damage the thread, you'll probably need to replace the drum support as well as the bearings. Using a metal rod or cold chisel and hammer, always vary your striking point when you hit the bearing so it comes out straight, or it may damage the aluminium housing it sits in. The hardest bearing to remove is always the inner one, so work on the outer bearing first because they usually come out quite easily. With the rear bearing out, you have more room to angle the striking point for the chisel on the inner bearing. Depending on the condition of the bearing, removing this one could take a lot of hitting. Try to hit just the outer sleeve of the bearing and at different points, or you could knock the centre out and leave just the outer sleeve, which would make removal that much harder, although not impossible. The water seal is the first part to come out, followed by the bearing itself. As you can see, the condition of this bearing housing is pretty rough, where the seal has been leaking for some time, but as long as the seating for the bearing and the water seal are smooth, then replacing the bearing should be okay. Due to the time factor, we've had to split this video into 3 parts, and fitting the bearings is covered in the next video. On behalf of Selfix UK, we'd like to thank you for watching this video and hope you found it interesting. Goodbye.